Let me tell you a story about The Matrix. The Matrix is a sci-fi action film written and directed by the Wachowski brothers, and it featured a computer simulation where some of the most over-the-top and awesome action can take place. The groundbreaking success of the first film led to the making of two sequels, The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. Now, alongside the production of these films, a game for The Matrix was being produced as well. The game would be developed by Shiny Entertainment, and the story would be written and directed by the Wachowski brothers themselves. It would be scheduled to be released on the same day as the second movie, Matrix Reloaded. Now, the story would sound like it would be okay as the directors of the film wrote this spin-off story. But making a game based off The Matrix would seem like a really difficult development job due to the difficult task of combining high adrenaline third-person shooting with a large emphasis on kung fu action, as seen in the films. How would Shiny Entertainment handle the difficult job of making a Matrix game? Well, let's find out.
We're in.
The Wachowskis' influence on the game is felt immediately at the start of the game, as we begin with the live-action cutscene. You will notice that throughout these cutscenes, many of the actors from the films were brought in to film them. There is a total of about a half hour of live-action footage, and these cutscenes are used in a similar way CG cutscenes are used to present the more important plot points in other story-focused games. As far as the quality of these cutscenes go, they are pretty well acted, for the most part.
Drop it!
I see we're just in time. You didn't think we left that door unlocked by accident, did you?
Uh-huh. I think he did.
The story itself takes place during the events of Matrix Reloaded and ends somewhere during Matrix Revolutions. The story follows three main characters: Niobe, the captain of the rebel ship known as the Logos, Ghost, Niobe's first mate, and Sparks, who is the operator on the ship. These characters will partake in many adventures, including learning about the attack on Zion, meeting up with characters from the movie, and blowing things up. The best story moments in the game have to be when the game story connects with the movie. There is a level where you set off numerous phone lines to throw the security programs within the Matrix off balance, so that you can set up a meeting with several Resistance members. And it turns out that this was the very same meeting that all of the characters had at the beginning of Matrix Reloaded. Another example of a crossover like this is when you meet Persephone. If you remember her from Matrix Reloaded, she was the one who, in exchange for the location of a prisoner, wanted Neo to kiss her in a sort of test. Well, it turns out that she does this on a regular basis with Ghost and Niobe, and that she is in fact a whore. Probably my favorite out of all these connections is when Ghost and Niobe go to Zion. Depending on which of these two characters you chose to play as at the beginning, you will get two different in-depth character scenes. We already know from Matrix Reloaded that Niobe is the former lover of Morpheus, and is now dating Commander Locke, so we get a scene where they discuss whether they will survive or not. And that's all good. But if you play as Ghost, you get to play a whole other level. While Ghost is spending time in the simulation of a dojo, Trinity joins him and they have a friendly sparring match, which in game terms is an awesome boss fight. Through this, we learn that Trinity thinks of her and Ghost as brother and sister, since they were both saved from the Matrix at the same time.
When are we gonna find you a girlfriend?
But Ghost, on the other hand, actually has love feelings for Trinity, but he can't follow through with them because he was friend-zoned, and she is already romantically involved with Neo. Yeah, Ghost is probably my favorite character in all of this because he goes through some character development dealing with his affections for Trinity, and he has some pretty cool things to say.
Kierkegaard reminds us that belief has nothing to do with how or why. Belief is beyond reason. I believe because it is absurd.
And I also like Sparks, as he is the guy who complains about everything, yet he goes along with it anyway.
Since your lives obviously mean nothing to you, I ask you to try to think of something that does have meaning. Namely, my life.
Sparks, shut up.
Sure, why not?
But I don't really like Niobe. She seems kind of like a bitch at times.
I need a moment with you.
I literally just walked in.
Please.
Oh, I'm sorry if I want to see my girlfriend after she's been away risking her life. I'm just being too inconsiderate. Now, enough of the story for now, let's talk about the gameplay. How does this game portray the intense shooter / kung fu action as portrayed in the film? The game starts you off doing some kung fu before you obtain any guns. You have a punch and kick button for basic attacks, you can use the use button to disarm opponents who are armed, and by pressing punch and kick at the same time, you can throw an enemy. But much of the melee combat takes a backseat to the gunplay, as most of the enemies in the later sections of the game have a lot of guns, rendering melee combat kind of useless. When you finally get some guns, you have a couple more options. The weaponry in this game is pretty standard. You will have your average machine guns, dual-wielding pistols, and shotguns, plus a grenade launcher you will get towards the end of the game. The shooting mechanics revolve around a lock-on system that will target the nearest enemy as soon as you begin shooting. There is also a cover system in place for when things get really hairy, though double tapping the left stick towards a wall is easier said than done. Now this all seems pretty standard and simple so far, but there is a huge problem with the controls. Now you would think that the controls for this would be left stick for movement, right stick for camera, but this game I guess wants to stand out! Left stick will move your character forward and backward and turn your character left and right. To strafe, you use the left and right shoulder buttons. R2 and L2 in my case. You would think with these really tough to learn and unusual controls that the right stick would at least be used for something important, but nope! If you flick the right stick in any direction, you will go in and out of first person view. The right stick doesn't control the direction of first person view, that job is left to the left stick. Question: why the hell can a first person view be activated using one of the frickin' buttons? It would free the right stick so it could be used for camera control. But for some reason, the developers decided to go with the most hard-to-learn control scheme in the game. Needless to say, you will spend a large portion of this game trying to get used to these controls, and you will die several times because of it. And no, you can't change the controls in the options menu. Despite the weird controls, this game seems to be sounding like an average generic third-person shooter. Where is the running on walls, sideways kicks, and bullet dodging? Where is the bullet time, the very thing that the Matrix films are known for? This is how the game uses bullet time. By holding down the shoulder button on the controller, you will activate focus mode, which is essentially bullet time. While in this mode, your character's abilities will be enhanced. You will jump higher, move faster, and your guns will be more accurate. You can also perform various stunts in focus mode. You can run on walls, dive in various directions, do one-handed cartwheels, and in the midst of doing these stunts, you can fire your weapon. I am happy to say that many of these abilities successfully portray the many different stunts and kung fu moves seen in the films. I'm especially glad that they allow me to do the goddamn sideways kicks. Never gets old. You have the ability to use a lot of focus at a time, though in exchange for that, it also takes a while to recharge. For each encounter, you need a dispatch of all the enemies as quickly as possible and sparingly use your focus, or else you may find yourself in a lot of trouble. So that is the core gameplay, and for the most part it works really well, and it is really fun with the bullet time stunts. But from time to time, any game will have to break up its core gameplay with different sections and levels to avoid it becoming repetitive. Let's take a look at some of the levels in Enter the Matrix. Each of these levels are stages divided into smaller condensed levels. The first stage of the game is pretty much nothing but regular combat and core gameplay, so that you can attempt to get used to the controls. But there is no tutorial, all you have are these random tips that you access in the start menu. You don't start out with all of the tips. They randomly appear throughout the course of the game, and they don't appear when you could use them.
Took your time.
Wow, that would have been useful 3 stages ago. The next level is a driving and shooting section. Now this is the first level of the game that differs between the two characters. When you play as Ghost, you protect the car by shooting oncoming pursuers. As Niobe, you drive the car to the goal while avoiding enemies, and you have the ability to hit the focus button to have Ghost come out and defend you. But why is the use of this limited? I mean, Ghost sticks his head out the entire time when you play as him. It seems weird. After this introduction, the game will vary it up a little. You will fight in a variety of locations like airports, sewers, a luxurious mansion, a power plant, and the streets. Besides the regular fighting, you will have to do some other objectives. And these deviations from the core combat are sometimes good, but a lot of times bad. In the airport level as Ghost, you encounter your first boss fight against a helicopter. This thing can kill you ridiculously fast if you aren't in cover. And cover is very limited. Besides shooting at you, he will occasionally drop off some soldiers to fire at you. Since there can be pretty lengthy loading screens, it can be hard to memorize a strategy for taking this thing down. But that isn't even the biggest problem with this boss battle. During one of my 30 attempts, I saw an enemy glitched on this wall, so I used it as an opportunity to take cover and wait for my health to regenerate. Why doesn't my health regenerate here? Well, I don't know. For some really stupid reason, this is the only level where your health does not regenerate. This, combined with a boss that can take away all of your health in a mere second, makes this the hardest level in the entire game, this early into the second stage. This is the level that forced me to master the needlessly complex controls because there was no way I was going to get past this without reaching the highest possible skill level in this game. This level will break you! And to rub salt into the wound, you have to fight another helicopter a couple levels later. The helicopter comes from all four sides with no clear pattern, and the only way to win is to get lucky after maybe 20 attempts. Other frustrating sections include a car chase sequence where the person chasing you takes no damage, a level where you have to defend a bunch of resistance members from endless amounts of soldiers, and a level where the entire length of rooms are covered in explosives, where one stray bullet means game over. But these levels are not the biggest problem by a long shot. I have already mentioned how the game has stages divided into several levels. Well, in these levels, there are absolutely no checkpoints. This would seem unfair. But many of these levels are made to be incredibly short, so that the lack of checkpoints won't be a problem. However, many of these levels are way too long, making the lack of checkpoints inexcusable. A good example of this is in the sewer stage, where in one level you have to stealth kill a couple of guys, get ambushed again from behind, retrieve a flashlight, get ambushed yet again, save someone else from an ambush, so he doesn't have to go through the same pain you went through, fight through an army of soldiers through a long hallway, and then have the camera suddenly change on you, causing you to fall off and start all over again. It's almost like the game wanted to piss me off. With the lack of checkpoints and some really frustrating sections, there are at least some really good parts to make up for it. All of the levels where you encounter agents are pretty awesome. The game introduces them in the most badass way possible. In these levels you usually have to run away from them while fighting other enemies, and since the agents are unkillable, these levels make for a wonderfully terrifying experience. Though for both Niobe and Ghost's campaign, there is a level where you are forced to fight an agent one-on-one. In Niobe's campaign, you have to push an agent off a plane, and in Ghost's campaign, you have to push the agent into sparkling computer servers to kill him. Other than the agent levels, the crossover levels are probably the best. I have already mentioned the awesome cameo/boss fight with Trinity as Ghost, but there are many other great crossovers. One of my favorite is halfway through the game when you have to fight through Merivision's mansion. You get to meet the Keymaker, Persephone, and you fight these vampire-like enemies using mostly melee combat and a wooden stake. A melee-focused level is definitely appreciated, and it serves as a nice break from the gunplay. There is also a really fun boss fight at the end with a tough vamp named Cujo. I guess besides having all sorts of religious symbolism, The Matrix can also make Stephen King references. Nice touch. But my favorite crossover level is the one with Agent Smith. It could be a standard run away from an agent level, but the good thing about being Agent Smith is that there are so many of them. You have to run away from the Agent Smiths and make it to a hardline before being killed. This level is so wonderfully terrifying. Agent Smiths counter all of your attacks if you try to fight them. And while you are running away from them, they will attempt to surround you like the frickin' swarm, and they will ambush you at various locations. This level doesn't exactly test your skills with the core gameplay, but it doesn't matter. Too bad that level was followed up by an anticlimactic turn section, or a really hard to control flying section if you're playing as Niobe. And then after that, how does the game decide to end?
What if they don't find us?
They will.
How do you know?
I just know.
What do you think will happen after that?
I don't know. But I got a feeling it's gonna be one hell of a ride.
A crummy commercial? Son of a bitch.
Before I give my final thoughts, I want to talk about the differences between Niobe and Ghost's campaigns. When you play this game for the first time, you would think that playing as the other character would be completely different, as many of the cutscenes indicate that they are definitely in two different places. But it turns out that out of all the stages, 3 of the stages are played the exact same way, 2 are half the same and half different, and only 2 stages are completely different. I feel that the campaigns are different enough, but it is sometimes disappointing to play the same section of a game, because you wonder what the other level could have been. And it is also really weird to see the 2 characters perform almost the exact same way in some of the live-action cutscenes. I mean, that's lazy incarnate. I would like to say that this game is worth playing because of the core gameplay and many of the good bits, but because of the lack of checkpoints in the really long levels, and some of the terrible levels, it's really hard to recommend. All I can say is if you are looking for the standard satisfying game experience, you would have to look elsewhere. But if you are resilient enough to wade through the not-so-stellar aspects of this game, it's worth a look. It's an okay game.